I'm only good at two things: having an intimate understanding of how capo theory works and being able to live a totally functional life despite being in a constant state of dehydration. But today we're talking about capo theory and a little bit about how to use a capo, but maybe like just different ways of thinking about why you're using a capo and optimizing it to the very best of its abilities. This video is sponsored by Sweetwater and Kaiser Capo specifically. We'll talk more about this capo in a second because it's like the best out there. But what does a capo do? Basically, it makes everything higher or lower. You can move open chord shapes into whatever key that you want, all right? So, real quick example, let's say you know a song that is A minor, F to C. And it's like, all right, well maybe, I'm trying to sing, but it's too low for me. I could like transpose it and I can make it like A sharp minor, F sharp, C sharp, and those drastically change the shapes. Or you can just put a capo on the first fret and use the same shapes, okay? So now essentially if that was in the key of, let's say, A minor, you put it on the first fret and it's now in the key of A sharp minor, put it on the second fret, now it's in the key of B minor, but you're still using the same shapes, okay? So that's the very kind of fundamental use of a capo, just being able to maybe transpose very quickly just by putting it on a different fret. And just so you know, you want it to be as close to the fret as possible without being directly on top of it to get the best tone. And if you're one of those super weirdos that puts your capo on from the bottom up, turn the video off right now. We can't have that energy here. You want the handle to be on your face side, right? Now, the one thing that I see a lot of times is people will be using a capo as a crutch to not learn other chords, right? That's not what this is about. You don't want to be that guy or girl. You want to be able to use a capo and employ it for very specific reasons, and this is what we're going to talk about, right? So maybe you're looking up like a chord chart, and it's like, all right, I'm learning like a John Mayer song. It says capo on 3. Now, I'm familiar with these chords, so I'm going to do it. But I think what we miss out on is really understanding why this capo is so valuable. And to know that, you have to know about the chords that you're using, right? In any key, there are 7 notes, and any 7 of those notes can become a chord. So once you start thinking of keys as a collection of chords, then it makes capo theory that much more interesting, okay? So really quick, capo's going to be off the guitar for just a second. And we're going to go through the chords in 2 separate keys, key of C and the key of G. And if you know all these and you have all your bases covered, you can play pretty much any key anywhere on the neck in a very usable region of the guitar. All right? So in the key of C, C is our 1 chord. It's a major chord, right? The notes in this key are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. All right? So we've got 3 major chords and 3 minor chords in any key. If you can count through them in order like that, that's really great. 1, 4, and 5 are major chords, 2, 3, and 6 are minor chords, all right? So what that means is C major, D minor is the 2 chord, E minor is the 3 chord, F major is the 4 chord, G major is the 5 chord, A minor is the 6 chord, and if you're super fancy, if you're one of those people who say capo instead of capo, B minor 7 flat 5 is the 7 chord, back to C, okay? So think of this as a collection of chords. I think the hesitation that comes with really understanding capo theory is like, all right, well, I just know a bunch of chords. I know like 15, 16 chords. Let me just move those all around the neck. It's not about moving the chords around. It's about moving the keys around. So when you start seeing a key as a collection of chords, all of this becomes way easier, all right? So in the key of C, our open shapes are, one more time, C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, and A minor are the 6 main chords. We're gonna leave that diminished one out because this isn't a jazz theory lesson. This is a lesson about staying dehydrated and using a capo. All right, now in the key of G, we have some of the same chords, but now G is 1. So we have G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and E minor, okay? Now why this is important with the capo is gonna become clear in 1 second. Let's say you put the capo on the 5th fret. This is a very common thing that I see. Capo on 5, all right? And let's play the chords G, C, D, G, okay? And this drives me crazy sometimes because a lot of times, like, all right, there's some advantages from playing higher up the neck. You're playing in a different range, essentially. Like, if I'm playing this G right here, this high note right here, which again, in a G major shape, this would be a G, but in reality, it's actually the 8th fret on the guitar, this is a C. It's like, all right, well, that's a note that I probably wouldn't be able to play in open position. But here's the thing. If we use these chords, G, C, D, capo on 5, it's actually the exact same thing as playing C, F, G in open position. Okay, so let's talk about this for a second. If we put that capo back on the 5th fret, it's very important to understand where your root notes are. All right, when I play a G chord shape, my root note is where my middle finger is, the 8th fret on the E string. Okay, this note happens to be a C, so I'm playing a major chord relative to the capo still. So this is a C major, but as a G shape. All right, and I think that's really the most fundamental thing to know about using a capo instead of just messing around putting it up back and forth, which again is great, you know, if you don't think about the chords and stuff, but as soon as you start playing with other musicians, let's say you're playing with a piano players don't really have capos, even though they can, usually keyboard players can transpose up and down with like a button sometimes, but we're not gonna get started with that. They're like, oh, what are you playing? I'm playing G capo on 5. Well, actually, you're playing a C major, all right? And it's great. Like I said, there are different advantages, especially if you're really good with certain inflections in a key, right? Like, let's say you've really practiced in the key of C, going from like C, doing those hammer-ons, right? Like that. And you know, you got your middle finger kind of like jumping off and coming back on, stuff like that. And you want to have that same sound. But it's like, you know, I don't really know how to do that with like a G sharp, right? If you get a G sharp major chord, you use bar chord, which is great, but it's like, all right, well, maybe why don't I just track this all the way down to where a G sharp would be, and then you end up on the 11th fret, and then I got to go back 3 frets to put the capo there, and then now I've got this crazy G sharp major that I can kind of do all my inflections with. So the interesting thing about this is it really changes the entire range of the guitar when you get it this high up. In fact, a lot of times I don't love seeing a capo past the 7th fret if it's just to make keys higher, right? Because there's always a different way to do it. In this specific case, this would be a reason to do it if there's a very specific kind of open hammer-on move that you're really good with. Or let's say you're playing with another guitar player and maybe he or she is playing in a different range. This is an easy way to maybe vibe with another guitar player using different chord voicings to get a totally different range of the guitar. But it's probably not the most efficient way if you're just trying to play, you know, like this G sharp major chord, which is why it's really important to just start thinking about where root notes are. In fact, a really easy way to do this is we could just put the capo on the 1st fret and then play a G major, and then now we've got a G major, a G sharp major chord just by that. This chord right here, capo 1G, is the same as capo 8C, okay? But like I said, the advantage is now you can kind of do all those cool maybe like key of C runs that maybe you can't do with the same thing like on a G. It definitely has like a different vibe for it, right? So that's a very important distinction to make, and that's why you want to learn at least those 2 keys worth of chords. And then the more that you learn, the more that you add into kind of like, you know, your repertoire of different chords that you could use, the better you're going to get and the more options you're going to have with the capo. Because again, even though that example is like a good way to kind of showcase how you can do that, let's say you want to get maybe to the 10th fret. Now I'm really running out of real estate here. This is like, now I'm locked in. I'm so limited to what I can play if that capo is on the 10th fret, even with this awesome Kaiser capo. Guys, have you ever seen the Kaiser capo? Don't cheap out and get a cheap capo. This is like probably dollar for dollar the best capo. And I'm not saying this just because Sweetwater and Kaiser sponsored this video. This was the capo that really changed my life. I remember the very first capo I got was one of those ones where you like wrap like an elastic fabric around like a piece of rubber or something. And it was always in danger of snapping off and exploding. Now that got the job done. I'm not totally hating on that capo because it was like $5 at the time. But what happened was the rubber that would hold the strings down, eventually grooves would wear into it, so it would be buzzy even when I had the capo on. My first real good capo was this exact Kaiser one, which hasn't really changed over the years, except for now they have a bunch of different colors, because it's really just the perfect capo. The rubber lasts forever. I've gigged with a Kaiser capo for years and years and years, and I never had that problem where it would kind of like pinch into the string and then create like a groove to start buzzing. Kaiser capos are the one that you want to get. But that being said, you still don't want to put it all the way on the 10th fret because then you're locked into a different position. So if you can learn a few different keys and move them around, that's great. The beautiful thing about learning the chords in the key of C and the chords in the key of G is they're pretty far away. If G is the 3rd fret, we go a whole step and a whole step and another half step before we get to C. So that's a good kind of range away from where we want to go. I personally would maybe learn all the chords in even like another key. The next one I would pick would probably be either F or A. Let's just do A major real quick because there's a really great example of what you can use a capo to like play in the key of A. So the chords in the key of A major are A minor, B minor, C sharp minor, D major, E major, F sharp minor, okay? Now, aside from just knowing the chords, I think A is the prettiest key because you can do cool stuff like this. Just by like leaving the high B and E string open, or even just like the low E, again, 7A, 7D, 6G, open B and open E. I think A really has a lot of cool open chord voicings where if you let that B and E string just ring out, and same with the key of E or whatever, it's really great. So that's something that, like let's say I wanted to play that in the key of B major, that's really kind of impossible because if I move this here, now I just have the open strings aren't coming with me. So what I can do is I can put the capo on the 2nd fret, because remember A sharp, then B, and then now I can play my A major shape like this. And it sounds great, right? So that's one thing that, it's not a crutch, it's like I literally cannot play a chord voicing where I can be this high on the neck but still get back to the other open strings. So I think that's actually a really great example of why you might use a capo even if you can, you know, transpose in your head all the keys and all the chords, which is something that I really encourage you to do. So, thank you to Kaiser, thank you to Sweetwater for sponsoring the video, and let this be a challenge. You don't use a capo as a crutch, use it as an informed decision. You learn a couple of different groupings of chords, again, just 6 chords in a key. Just start learning a few of the open ones, see which ones you like. Again, like, you know, famous artists have famous keys that they use, like James Taylor, for instance. He's a guy that uses a capo for a lot of stuff because he's got such a signature sound in like the key of D. So he'd be like, I want to use my key of D shapes in other keys because, you know, he's got like the cool inflections that he can kind of use, but use them in any other key. So that's the ultimate utility to using a capo. And now you're gonna have to get one and use my affiliate link in the description to do it. Let me know if you have any questions or comments, and I'll talk to y'all soon.